Welcome to this episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. I'm Taylor Burton-Edwards, Liturgy Man with Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. I'm your apportionment dollars at work to help you strengthen worship and the understanding of worship where you are. Today's question is based on a question I received from Barbara Day Miller a few weeks ago on Facebook, and it's about the use of color during the Christian year. Barbara's question in particular was about if we're having a funeral or a wedding during ordinary time, would my guidance be to use green for ordinary time or white for the wedding or the funeral? Let's first go to what the Book of Worship says about the use of those colors for those kinds of particular occasions in the course of a season. In the third paragraph of the section on colors for the Christian year on page 226 of the Book of Worship, we read these words: "White may also be used at weddings and at services where the sacrament of baptism is central. White is recommended at services of death and resurrection because it symbolizes both death and resurrection. At services of Holy Communion, white linens on top of the Lord's table are customary, but the paraments hanging over the front or sides of the table and the other visual should reflect the day or season of the year." So that's the guidance we have from the Book of Worship. In other words, that it's possible that if you're dealing with one of these kinds of occasions, baptism, a wedding, a funeral, that regardless of the season of the year, you might want to choose white. If the occasion is Holy Communion, no matter what happens, the season still defines the basic color scheme. You'd simply have a white covering over the top of the table on those days. Now, I would like to make a suggestion that from a broader historical perspective, that if we look at the process by which we came to understand what we would be doing in coming to these colors and kind of how we got to this color scheme and these kinds of recommendations, that in fact the underlying ethos, or as Dwight Vogel would call it, the depth dynamic at work here, is to use color primarily to locate us in space and time within the schema of the overall Christian year. So the use of color for paraments, for the Lord's table, for altar hangings, for hangings on the lectern and the pulpit, or for background graphics if you're using screens, was primarily developed as a means to provide kind of the backdrop atmosphere for what's going on a grander scale across the whole church. And then other colors and other elements in the worship might identify what's going on in the nearer frame in this particular moment that relates to this larger schema of time, understanding that what's happening in the Christian year is a reflection of the whole of the Christian story. And so that what we want with colors is to provide us this background. And that fundamental color palette provides that background in which we understand ourselves in this particular moment, whatever the occasion may be. So I shared with Barbara on the basis of that kind of reflection, that my recommendation is that throughout the year, actually regardless of what the occasion is, you pay attention to what the day or the season is. And so if it's happening on All Saints, it would be white because All Saints is white. If it's happening at other points during the course of the season after Pentecost, the color would be green because that's what locates us. Green is the ultimate locator for us in terms of where we are in the course of the Christian year, the season after Pentecost. And you might use other elements that are white. Perhaps the stole of the presider might be white, even if the background color is green. So I hope that kind of reflection is helpful for you. I certainly recommend you follow the advice of the Book of Worship on this matter. Note, however, that the Book of Worship says may and recommended. It does not say shall, and it doesn't say shall for any of this. So as you're thinking about color, think about it schematically. Think about it from what is actually trying to be communicated here. And simply, I'd ask you to recognize this larger history and sort of larger theological agenda at work in the use of color to locate us in the broader Christian story in space and time. Hope this has been helpful. Remember, you can always contact me, worship@liturgyfolks.com, through the UMC Worship Facebook group, or drop a line on this page. And perhaps your question or comment will become the basis for a future episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. And the peace of Christ be always with you.